You probably didn't know this. Frankly, nobody in our studio knew this when we were talking about it before we came on air, that well into the 1970s, indeed into the 1980s, pregnant women in the UK were, in effect, being punished and persecuted for being potential unmarried mothers. Some of the 200,000 unmarried mothers who were forced to give up their babies for adoption in Britain are now campaigning for an official apology about this from the government.
I happen to know about it just because it happened to a friend of mine.
Really?
But, but I think it's pretty anecdotal, which is why this evening's Tonight on ITV1 looks into this extraordinary and largely hidden scandal, frankly. And in a moment, we're going to speak to one of the mothers featured in the programme and also the reporter, Sarah Cork, who's been working on bringing this to everyone's notice. Well, Diana Defries, as you saw there, is in the investigation and programme tonight and is here with us this morning alongside Sarah Cork, the ITV News social affairs correspondent. My heart goes out to you, Diana. I mean, it is so devastating. And feels unbelievable. I know Rich was saying he couldn't believe that it happened well into the 80s as well. Mm-hmm. Tell us your circumstances, how you found yourself in the position of having this pressure put on you.
I was very young, as has been said. I got involved with someone when I was 15.
Yeah.
And I thought we had a relationship. I was very naive. And when I eventually realised I was pregnant and I told him, he just said, "Oh, well, that's it then." And I never saw him again.
So you were probably hoping at that point he'd say, "Oh, fabulous, we are going to have a baby," because I assume you wanted the baby maybe at that point.
Well, I was naive enough to believe that it would all work out and it would all be lovely. And unfortunately, that wasn't what happened.
So what happened on the day you'd carried this little bundle of joy throughout the pregnancy and had given birth? What then happened?
Do you mean immediately afterwards?
Yeah, on the day when... on the day when you were forced to give it up. Just talk us through how it came about.
I'd been... The experience of being in a mother and baby home and then giving birth in an NHS hospital where you were mistreated horribly.
In what way?
Everything from the staff not speaking. In the delivery room, they held me down rather than let me move around and sit up.
And do you think that's because, by this point, there was pressure to give it up for adoption, so everybody had that attitude?
I think that is probably the case because after my daughter was born, one of the nurses tried to take her away. And she said, "Oh, this baby's flagged for adoption." So clearly there was something in the medical notes that indicated they could treat me the way they did. And the way they treated me was to just pretend I was almost like a bystander in the process.
So in other words, there was a huge moral judgment that you were a teenage girl who'd got pregnant. There's no prospect of you getting married. This was an illegitimate baby, basically. And that put you in deep shame. This is kind of good old-fashioned Catholic guilt, isn't it? Except we're in a Protestant country, which is interesting. I mean, I was looking at... This is 1974 this happened to you, and many, many others, and it carried on happening. I was just looking at what was in the charts in 1974. ABBA was at #1 with Waterloo. A Cockney Rebel were at the top of the charts. The Osmonds. This is the modern age. And yet, women like her were being treated in almost a medieval way, in the modern era. Were you shocked to discover this?
Absolutely. I mean, I was actually on maternity leave myself when I came across this story. I saw a local news report about a man who was searching for the unmarked grave of his stepson, a baby boy who had been born and died in a home for unmarried mothers in pretty terrible circumstances. I was really shocked by this because I had an awareness of these kinds of institutions and forced adoptions in Ireland, that's well documented, but had no idea that it had happened here in England at this scale. So I started investigating. I put in, lots of FOIs, Freedom of Information requests. I went to the National Archives to try and find out more information about the homes. And then I started speaking to women like Diana, birth mothers, and also adult adoptees about what they'd been through. And I was just shocked by the cruelty, the trauma...
Because it was brutal, wasn't it? I mean, these babies, these beautiful newborn babies, were literally being ripped from their mother's arms.
And is that what happened to you?
Yeah.
So just to get into your state of mind at that point, you know, presumably your family were in support of the baby being adopted? Everybody around you was pushing you to this?
Everybody acted as if it was a done deal.
Right.
The way it worked out for me was I had a 2-hour journey from where I'd been sent to the mother and baby home to come back to West London, which is where the adoption agency was. I carried my baby, I held my baby for those 2 hours. That was the longest I'd ever held her because I'd been actively discouraged from picking her up.
Were you fighting this? Were you arguing against it, or were you too
I was
overwhelmed?
At that point, I was so beaten down
Yeah.
because everybody was singing from the same hymn sheet, if you like. And there was a feeling that I had no power, I had no autonomy, I even had no control from the point of delivery. Excuse me, from the point of delivery onwards, I had nothing.
When you went into labour, did you know that the baby was going to be taken off you?
I had this fond wish that it wouldn't happen.
Did you name her?
Yes, I registered her, I gave her a name, and I had this dream that once my parents saw me with her, they would change their minds.
Just heartbreaking.
And instead,
so you
that
have this
wasn't
2-hour train journey. You're holding your newborn to your breast, and then you get to the agency. Just describe to us the last moments that you were with your child.
OK.
If you can.
I can. It isn't easy because it's very difficult experience to talk about. But I stood there holding her, and I felt like this. It was like something had changed in me, holding her that length of time.
I bet.
And it suddenly all made sense. This was my child, and I was really filled with this feeling
maternal love,
you know, that sort of joy that you have. And the woman came out and said, "It's time."
Oh, God.
And I still thought that they would change their minds. And I just shook my head and held on to her. My mother said, "Oh, for goodness sake," prized her out of my arms and handed her over.
Oh, darling.
And,
oh, my goodness.
All right, take your time. Take your time.
How did this... I mean, we can see the devastation all these years later over your face. Do you want some tissue?
I'm OK.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Go on,
maybe
grab
I will.
Because I know how important it is for you to speak out about this. But what was the impact on your life of all of this?
It changed everything. I think the biggest issue with having something like that done to you is you lose all sense of autonomy and power.
Of course.
So you don't feel you can choose... You don't feel you can make the life choices that other people would make.
Oh.
No.
So it impacts your attitude to yourself and your attitude to your life going forward. And I was still... I mean, I was 5 days into being 17 when that happened.
Oh, my God.
So it affected my education, it affected the way I went forward, and I made some probably poor choices because I felt that I was devalued, I was unworthy.
What about your relationship with your mother? Did you ever forgive her?
No.
I'm not surprised.
No.
Did she ever apologise? Did she ever...
No.
And have you ever been able to make contact with your daughter?
Yes, in that respect, I'm very lucky. She has also said that we've been very fortunate. And I was able to reunite with her when she was 18.
What would a sorry from the government mean for you? Because I know, Sarah, this is part of what you want this programme to identify. What would it mean for you, Anna?
What it would mean for me and for all the people affected by this, both the mothers and the children who were taken, it would be an acknowledgement of the major, major injustice that took place. It would be a way of validating what we've been saying for years, for decades, that this was wrong, that this should never have happened, and that support was available, but we weren't told. And it would be a way to go forward, in the words of the rather remarkable Giselle Pellico, the shame will change sides, the shame must change sides. So the shame that we've all been carrying for so long will then go onto the shoulders of those in the state who are responsible, because it was state-funded and it was state policy.
Sarah, presumably you're hoping that the programme, which is 8:30, isn't it, tonight, will force that and put some pressure on that happening.
Yeah, that's right. And I think these institutions, these mother and baby homes, they were places of punishment. Women were told to pray for forgiveness. They were denied pain relief in labour, told this will teach you a lesson. They were pressured, they were coerced. And they were told that they were unfit to be mothers. There was such cruelty. And we've asked the government repeatedly if they're going to issue a formal apology, like we've seen actually in Scotland, Wales and Australia in recent years. And the Department of Education sent us their response. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, said what happened was utterly shocking and terrible. And she said that she is looking carefully at what next steps may look like and hopes to say more soon, especially about what that could mean for redress. We don't have a timescale on that. Diana's been campaigning for 10 years for this apology. And we've also got a response from the Church of England, which ran most of these homes in England. And they said they are deeply saddened to hear these painful and distressing accounts and have asked anyone who feels they've been harmed or affected by their time in a Church of England home to come forward. But I think it's clear listening to Diana, this is lifelong trauma and people are still searching for answers.
Well, it just shows, doesn't it, that when we presume to make moral judgments on each other, it leads us into wickedness. And what happened to you was wicked. Never mind unfortunate or sad or tragic, it was wicked.
Thank you for saying that.
And thank you so much for telling us your story. It will help a lot of people, as painful as it is. Thank you.
Thank you.